My name is Morgan Myers. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've transferred $2,000 to my parents every single month without missing one payment. When I finally added everything together, the total came to $96,000. Then my wedding day arrived, the only day in 32 years when I asked my parents for one thing: be there. Neither of them showed up. Still wearing my wedding dress, I stood in the parking lot and called my mother. She picked up on the fourth ring. The 3 words she spoke ended our relationship forever. But the real explosion happened 30 minutes later, when my father checked his bank account and discovered what I had done. That was the moment he completely lost control. Before I tell you how everything unfolded, please take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from along with your local time. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the summer of 2021, the day my father came home from work for the very last time. I grew up in Scarborough, Maine, just outside Portland, in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked perfect and people only discussed money when it belonged to someone else. There were 2 children in our family, me and my younger sister, Jolene. We were 4 years apart, raised under the same roof by the same parents, yet somehow lived by completely different rules. I earned straight A's, received a scholarship, attended and eventually made it into medical school. From the day I turned 18, I never asked my parents for financial help, not for tuition, rent, food, or anything else. Instead, I worked 3 different jobs throughout college: tutoring students, working at the campus bookstore, and spending weekends at a nursing home. No one forced me to do it. I simply believed that was what was expected of me. Jolene's path looked very different. She dropped out of community college twice, then decided to find herself through a 200-hour yoga instructor certification that my parents happily paid $8,000 for. At 24, she married Brett Tate, a car salesman with perfect hair and a leased BMW. Their wedding was a modest celebration at a seafood restaurant in Portland. My parents covered the cost of her dress, paid for the flowers, and even helped fund the honeymoon. When I asked why I'd never received anything remotely similar, my mother, Patrice, looked at me as if I'd asked her to explain why the sky was blue. "Jolene is more sensitive," she said softly. "She needs us." My father, Gene, simply nodded from his recliner. He always nodded whenever my mother spoke. In 30 years of marriage, I never once saw him openly disagree with her in front of either of us. Back then, I didn't resent Jolene. I honestly believed that was simply how families worked. The stronger child carried the weaker one. What I didn't realize was that I was slowly being conditioned to accept that role. Then came June 2021. My father lost his job at Portland Precision Manufacturing. He had spent 30 years there as a floor supervisor before the company downsized and eliminated his entire department. He was 57 years old, had no college degree, and enough retirement savings to survive roughly 14 months. I was 28, beginning my first year as an emergency medicine resident at Maine Medical Center. My annual salary was $62,000 before taxes. After deductions, insurance, and student loan payments, my monthly take-home pay was around $3,800. That Tuesday afternoon, my mother called in tears. "We can't keep up with the mortgage, Morgan. Your father is crushed. He won't even get out of bed." At 2 a.m., during a break in the hospital, I grabbed a napkin and started calculating. If I sent them $2,000 every month, I would have $1,800 left for rent, food, gas, and every other expense. It would be difficult, but it could be done. That same night, I created an automatic transfer. Every month, exactly $2,000 would move from my checking account into the Myers joint savings account. A notification popped up on my phone. $2,000 successfully transferred to Myers joint savings account ending in 4471. I finished a granola bar, slipped my phone into my pocket, and walked back into the emergency room. That weekend, I created a spreadsheet on my laptop. The first row was highlighted in green. Month 1, $2,000. At the bottom, the running total also read $2,000. I kept telling myself it wouldn't last forever. Dad would eventually find another job. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a year. Then the transfers would stop, and I'd finally be able to focus on paying down my student loans. I owed $280,000 from medical school, and the interest kept growing at 6.8% while I survived on cafeteria meals during midnight shifts. Still, I repeated the same word to myself. Temporary. For 4 years, that single word stayed alive in my mind. For years. $96,000. Month after month, the payments continued. So, did my 80-hour work weeks in the emergency department. I lived in a 400-square-foot studio apartment, sleeping on a mattress placed directly on the floor beside a microwave I'd bought from Goodwill. Most of my meals came from the hospital cafeteria for dollar salads, discounted sandwiches from the previous day, or whatever remained under the warming trays after the night shift began. My parents weren't living that way. When I visited Scarborough for Christmas in 2021, I found brand new hardwood flooring in the living room. The kitchen had been upgraded with modern appliances, including a French door refrigerator and a convection oven. Even the bathroom had been completely retiled. My mother proudly walked me through every renovation as though she were hosting a home makeover show. "We found an amazing contractor through the neighborhood Facebook group," she said with a smile. I asked how much everything had cost. She dismissed the question with a wave of her hand. "Your father took care of it." My father, the man who hadn't worked in 6 months. The same man who had refused a warehouse position because, as he put it, it's beneath someone with 30 years of supervisory experience. My father refused a job at Home Depot simply because he didn't want to wear an apron. Yet no one ever asked how my residency was going. No one wondered about my tiny apartment, whether I was eating enough, sleeping enough, or barely making it through another exhausting week. Not once did anyone say thank you. Christmas dinner came around, and Jolene arrived in a brand new sage green Honda CR-V, still wearing temporary dealer plates. My mother lit up with pride. "Doesn't she look amazing in that car?" I looked from the SUV to my mother. "Who paid for it?" Silence. Instead of answering, Patrice smoothly shifted the conversation to Jolene and Brett's plans for a spring vacation. I drove back to my apartment in my 2014 Honda Civic, its odometer showing 211,000 miles. The second year wasn't harder because of the hospital. I could handle the emergency room. Heart attacks before sunrise, broken bones by lunchtime, overdoses after midnight. I knew exactly how to respond when a body was in crisis. That was what I had been trained to do. What I wasn't prepared for was watching my own family celebrate someone else using the money I worked so hard to earn, while acting as though I barely existed. In the spring of 2022, Jolene thought she was pregnant. It turned out to be a false alarm, but my mother still drove 2 hours to her apartment with homemade soup, flowers, and a stuffed bear she'd bought from a gift shop. That same week, I ended up in the hospital myself with severe dehydration after a 14-hour shift. I called my mother while sitting in an 4-chair. She answered between bites of food. "Oh, honey, drink more water. I can't come. Jolene needs me this week." Jolene's tests had come back negative 3 days earlier. That September, she had her real wedding, a small ceremony at a waterfront restaurant. My parents paid for her dress, the flowers, and even contributed toward a honeymoon in Cancun. I never asked how much it all cost. The answer was probably somewhere in my spreadsheet. Month after month, the green rose continued to grow until the total passed $36,000. I attended the wedding, raised a glass during the toast, smiled for every photograph, and afterwards sat alone in my car with the engine turned off. 18 months. $36,000. Just before the photographer took the family portrait, my mother called out, "Let's get the family photo, the 4 of us." I was standing barely 6 feet away. The 4 of them smiled. The camera flashed. I wasn't in the picture. By the spring of 2023, I had been sending money home for 2 full years. One evening, I checked my student loan balance. $274,000. The interest was growing faster than I could make progress. At that pace, I wouldn't be free of the debt until I was 42. I finally decided it was time for a conversation. Instead of sending $2,000 every month, I wanted to reduce it to $1,500. It was still generous, far more than most adult children ever gave their parents, and it still represented nearly 30% of my take-home pay. I called my mother on a Saturday morning. Mom, I need to talk about the monthly transfers. My student loans. She interrupted before I could finish. After everything we sacrificed for you, there it was. Her favorite weapon. Always loaded. Always ready. We fed you. We clothed you. We drove you to every science fair and every college visit. And now you're putting a price on gratitude. I gave in. The transfers stayed at $2,000. The following week at work, my attending physician, Dr. Lena Kovich, cornered me in the break room. Lena was 38, direct, and the only person in the hospital who noticed every extra shift I volunteered to take. You look like you haven't slept in a year, she said. That isn't dedication. It's something else. I insisted I was fine. She clearly didn't believe me, but she was wise enough not to push. 3 days after that phone call, I opened Instagram. My mother had posted photos from a weekend getaway in Cape Cod. Lobster dinner. Oceanfront views. The caption read, "Blessed life. Grateful heart. Blessed." With my $2,000 paying for the lobster. I closed the app and walked back into the emergency room. In July 2023, Garrett Holt arrived at the hospital carrying a toolbox and wearing steel toe boots. His electrical contracting company had landed the 6-week project to rewire the 3rd floor. He was 33, a licensed master electrician from Lewiston, driving a dented 2016 Ford F-150 with a local 567 bumper sticker. We first met in the cafeteria. He unpacked a roast beef sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of coffee while I stared down another wilted Caesar salad. "You work here?" he asked. "Emergency medicine resident. And you eat that every day?" "Most days." Without hesitation, he slid half of his sandwich across the table. My mom packed extra. That simple gesture started everything. Coffee together after my shifts. Text messages between his job sites and my trauma cases. He was steady in a way I'd forgotten people could be. No pretending. No hidden motives. Just someone who meant exactly what he said. It took me 3 months before I finally told him about the $2,000. We were sitting in his truck one October evening, heater running against the cold. I blurted it out quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "I send my parents $2,000 every month. They depend on it. My dad lost his job 2 years ago, and they can't make ends meet." Garrett stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he started doing the math in his head, counting on his fingers the same way I had when I first agreed to send the money, because some numbers are simply too big to understand at a glance. "Morgan, that's nearly 30% of your income," Garrett said. "And you're telling me they need it?" No one had ever challenged those 2 words before. They need it. Hearing someone question that assumption made everything I had accepted in silence suddenly feel unstable. Thanksgiving 2023 was the first time I brought Garrett home to Scarborough. My mother answered the door, studying him from head to toe the way a jeweler inspects a stone they've already decided isn't genuine. "So, Garrett," she asked, "what exactly do you do?" "I'm a licensed electrician," he replied. "I own a small electrical contracting company in the Portland area." Patrice smiled politely, though there wasn't an ounce of warmth behind it. "An electrician. Well, that's certainly honest work." My father, Gene, shook Garrett's hand without bothering to stand up. "So, is the business profitable?" "We stay busy." Jolene, now 7 months pregnant, leaned against the kitchen counter. "Do you have benefits?" "Health insurance." That question came from someone who had never worked a job that provided health insurance herself. Garrett handled every comment with a level of patience I admired. He talked about his crew, the licenses he'd earned, and his plans to expand into solar installation. Every answer was calm, confident, and genuine. He never tried to impress people who had already decided not to value him. After dinner, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. The hallway was dark. My parents didn't realize I was standing there. I heard my mother first. "An electrician. Our daughter becomes a doctor, and she's marrying an electrician. At least Jolene married a sales manager." Then my father spoke. "The same man whose mortgage payment I covered every month. As long as those checks keep coming, who cares who she marries?" I stood frozen in the hallway. My hand gripped the drinking glass. My feet rested on the hardwood floors my money had paid for. As long as the checks keep coming. As if I were nothing more than a monthly payment. As if love came with automatic billing. In February 2024, Garrett proposed on the hospital rooftop after one of my overnight Saturday shifts. He didn't even use a ring box. He kept the ring loose inside his jacket pocket because he didn't want me guessing what was about to happen. The sun was rising over Portland. I was still wearing my scrubs. My hands smelled like sanitizer. I said yes before he even finished asking. That afternoon, I called my parents. My mother answered. "Hi, Mom. Garrett proposed this morning. We're engaged." Silence. Then she finally replied. "Well, I hope you've really thought this through." No congratulations. No excitement. No questions. Just the sound of someone deciding how much disappointment they could express without saying it outright. About an hour later, my father called. I could immediately tell my mother wasn't nearby because his voice dropped into the quieter tone he only used when she couldn't hear him. "Morgan, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "This wedding, it isn't going to change our arrangement, is it?" "You know what I mean." "Dad, I'm getting married. I'm planning a wedding. Some things may have to change." "Change?" His voice lowered even more. Not angry. Not yet. It was the voice of someone calculating what they might lose. "We depend on you, Morgan. You owe us this. Don't pull the rug out from under us." There it was. Their second weapon. The first had always been, "After everything we sacrificed for you." The second was, "You owe us this." One sentence built on guilt. The other built on obligation. I ended the call. Then I sat beside Garrett on the couch and repeated every word my father had said. Garrett looked at me quietly before saying, "Morgan, you don't owe them your life." I knew he was right, but knowing something and acting on it are rarely the same thing. There I was, engaged to the man I loved, while my own father was worried less about my marriage than about losing access to my paycheck. If you've ever had family treat your generosity like an invoice they expected you to keep paying forever, then you know why my hands wouldn't stop shaking. What I learned next changed everything. From March through May 2024, Garrett and I planned a simple wedding. We booked a renovated barn in Kennebunkport with white clapboard walls, string lights, and century-old windows overlooking the river. It held 85 guests. The date was Saturday, October 19th. Our total budget was $28,000. We paid for everything ourselves using Garrett's savings and my tax refund. No money from either family. Every dollar had been earned. Every expense carefully tracked. I invited my mother to go wedding dress shopping with me. Every invitation received the same response. "I'm busy." Jolene's nursery needs painting. Jolene's baby registry. Jolene's prenatal appointments. My sister had become my mother's full-time priority. Conveniently, that left no time at all for my wedding. Still, I mailed out save-the-date cards to everyone, including my parents. Their invitation arrived in mid-April. For 2 weeks, there was no reply. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "October is difficult. Jolene is due in November, and I need to be available." October. 5 full months before November. Yet somehow, October was already unavailable. Later that same evening, another notification appeared on my phone. $2,000 transferred to Myers Joint Savings. Account ending in 40471. Month 36. I updated my spreadsheet. Running total, $72,000. I stared at the notification the way you stare at a receipt for something you regret buying but can never return. $72,000. My mother couldn't spare a single weekend in 5 months to attend my wedding, yet she somehow had endless time for Jolene's nursery, Jolene's doctor appointments, and every other part of Jolene's life. I locked my phone and picked up the guest list. 85 names. While Garrett warmed leftover pasta in the kitchen, I sat at the table addressing invitation envelopes. This wedding belonged to us. Mine and Garrett's. The people who truly wanted to celebrate with us would show up. July 2024 brought Jolene's baby shower. My mother planned it with military precision. She rented a hotel venue in South Portland, hired catering for 40 guests, ordered a pink balloon arch, and commissioned a 3-tier cake with baby girl Tate written across it in elegant fondant lettering. I drove 2 hours to be there. My gift was a crocheted baby blanket in seafoam green. I'd spent 3 weeks making it during stolen moments on overnight shifts, looping yarn together beneath fluorescent hospital lights while heart monitors beeped in the background. During the shower, my mother stood before the guests and delivered a speech. She looked radiant. Her voice never wavered. Her eyes sparkled. It was the performance of a lifetime. "Jolene," she said, "you are the light of this family. Becoming a mother is the greatest thing a woman can do." I sat quietly in the corner. No one mentioned my wedding. No one asked about the venue, the dress, the date. I was 31 years old, an emergency medicine physician, and completely invisible. When Jolene opened my gift, she unfolded the blanket, glanced at it once, and smiled politely. "Oh, that's cute. Did you make it?" Without waiting for my answer, she placed it on the pile and reached for the next present. After the guests left, I stayed behind to help clean up. I stacked chairs, folded tablecloths, gathered paper plates. Near the dessert table, my mother pulled me aside. "Morgan, about the $2,000. Could you make it $2,500 this month? The shower cost more than we expected." "I'm paying for my own wedding, Mom. I can't send more." She tilted her head. It was that familiar look, the one that silently told me I had disappointed her. "You always find a way," she said. "You're the strong one. The strong one." She only called me that when she wanted more money. In August 2024, a letter arrived from the bank. The joint savings account required updated signature cards. Routine paperwork. Nothing unusual. But logging in meant seeing the account balance. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I opened the account on my laptop. After 38 months of deposits, even with mortgage payments being made, there should have been a healthy balance. Instead, $340. I checked it again. Then a third time. Still $340. I opened the transaction history. Withdrawal after withdrawal. Large amounts. Constant. $1,500 transferred to Jolene Tate. $2,000 to Brett Tate Auto Group. $800 to Jolene Tate. $3,200 to Brett Tate Auto Group. $1,000 to Cape Cod Resort and Spa. $1,200 to a furniture store in South Portland. $700 to a salon. $500 to a nail studio. The money I believed was saving my parents' home wasn't keeping them afloat. Most of it wasn't paying the mortgage at all. It was paying for Jolene's lifestyle, funding Brett's struggling dealership investment, covering my mother's vacations and personal spending. I took screenshots of every transaction, every single one. Then I saved them into a folder on my laptop labeled transfers. Next, I opened my spreadsheet. 38 green rows. Total sent, $76,000. I created a new column. One by one, I matched every withdrawal to Jolene or expenses connected to her. 40 minutes later, the numbers told the whole story. 43% of every dollar I had sent went directly to my sister or her husband. 22% paid for vacations, home renovations, and personal luxuries. Only 31% actually went toward the mortgage, the very reason my parents had claimed they needed my help. I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking from anger. They were shaking from the sick feeling that comes when you realize the people you trusted most had been deceiving you for years. I didn't tell Garrett. Not right away. For 3 days, I kept it to myself. During those 3 days, I reread 2 years of text messages from my mother. I wasn't searching for excuses. I was searching for patterns. And I found one. Every guilt-filled message. "We're drowning in bills." "Your father can't sleep." "We don't know how we're going to make it." Arrived within 48 hours of a large withdrawal from the account. On Monday, my mother would text that they were barely surviving. By Wednesday, $1,500 would be transferred to Jolene Tate. It wasn't coincidence. It was a system. My mother's messages weren't cries for help. They were triggers designed to keep the money coming long enough for her to redirect it to my sister. I opened my spreadsheet one more time and added another column. My father refused a job at Home Depot because, as he put it, wearing an orange apron was beneath him. Yet not once did anyone ask how my residency was going. No one cared about my tiny apartment. No one wondered if I was getting enough sleep, eating proper meals, or simply making it through each week. And no one ever said thank you. Christmas dinner arrived. Jolene pulled into the driveway in a brand new sage green Honda CR-V, still wearing temporary dealer tags. My mother's face lit up. Doesn't she look beautiful driving that car? I looked from the SUV to my mother. Who paid for it? Silence. Patrice smoothly redirected the conversation to Jolene's upcoming spring vacation with Brett. Later that evening, I drove back to Portland in my 2014 Honda Civic with 211,000 miles on the odometer. The second year hurt even more. Not because of the hospital. I could handle emergency medicine. Heart attacks before sunrise. Broken bones by lunchtime. Overdoses after midnight. Chaos followed a pattern, and I had been trained to respond to it. What I wasn't prepared for was watching the people I loved celebrate someone else's life with money I had earned while pretending I barely existed. Spring 2022. Jolene thought she might be pregnant. It turned out to be a false alarm. My mother immediately drove 2 hours to her apartment carrying homemade soup, flowers, and a stuffed bear from the hospital gift shop. That same week, after a 14-hour shift, I ended up in the hospital myself with severe dehydration. I called my mother from the infusion chair. She answered while chewing. Honey, just drink more water. I can't come. Jolene needs me this week. Jolene, whose pregnancy scare had already ended, whose test results had been negative 3 days earlier. That September, Jolene held her real wedding. A small waterfront ceremony at a restaurant in Portland. My parents paid for her wedding dress, the flowers, and part of a honeymoon in Cancun. I never asked what the final bill was. I already knew where the money had come from.
My spreadsheet told me everything.
18 green rows. $36,000 transferred. I attended. I gave a heartfelt toast. I smiled for every photograph. After the reception, I sat alone in my car with the engine off. 18 months. $36,000. Then I remembered something my mother had said to the photographer. Let's get a family picture. Just the four of us. I had been standing 6 feet away. The four of them smiled. The flash went off. I wasn't in the picture. Spring 2023. 2 years of transfers. One evening I logged into my student loan account. Balance remaining, $274,000. Interest was growing faster than I could pay it down. At that pace, I wouldn't be debt-free until my early 40s. I finally decided it was time to ask for a change. Instead of sending $2,000 each month, I would reduce it to $1,500. Even then, it was an incredibly generous amount. Still far above what most adult children contributed. Still nearly 30% of my take-home income. I called my mother on a Saturday morning. Mom, I need to talk about the monthly transfers. My student loans. She didn't even let me finish. After everything we've sacrificed for you. There it was again. Her favorite weapon. Always loaded. We fed you. We clothed you. We drove you to every science fair and every college visit. And now you're putting a price on gratitude. I folded. The transfers stayed at $2,000. The following week, my attending physician, Dr. Lena Kovich, cornered me in the hospital break room. Lena was 38, straightforward, and one of the few people who noticed I kept volunteering for extra shifts. You look like you haven't slept in a year, she said. That's not dedication. That's something else. I insisted I was fine. She clearly didn't believe me, but she didn't press. She understood when silence needed space. 3 days after that conversation with my mother, I opened Instagram. She had posted photos from a weekend getaway in Cape Cod. Fresh lobster. Oceanfront dining. Beautiful sunset. The caption read, "Blessed life. Grateful heart.
Blessed."
Paid for, at least in part, by the $2,000 leaving my account every month. I closed the app without commenting and headed back to the emergency department. In July 2023, Garrett Holt arrived at the hospital carrying a toolbox and wearing steel-toed work boots. His electrical contracting company had won the bid to rewire the third floor. 4-man crew, 6-week project. Licensed master electrician, 33 years old. From Lewiston, he drove a dented 2016 Ford F-150 with a local 567 Union sticker across the rear bumper. We first met in the cafeteria. He unpacked a roast beef sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of coffee from his lunch bag. Then he sat across from me while I ate the same wilted Caesar salad I'd been surviving on for nearly 2 years. "You work here?" he asked. "Emergency medicine resident." He glanced at my lunch. "You eat that every day?" "Most days." Without hesitation, he slid half of his sandwich across the table. "My mom packed extra." That's how everything began. Coffee together after my overnight shifts. Text messages between his construction jobs and my hospital rotations. He brought a steadiness into my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. No games. No pretending. Just someone whose actions always matched his words. It took me 3 months before I finally told him about the $2,000. We were sitting in his truck one October evening outside the hospital, the heater humming softly. I blurted it out as quickly as possible, like ripping off a bandage. "I send my parents $2,000 every month. They rely on it. Dad lost his job 2 years ago, and they can't make ends meet." Garrett stayed quiet for a long moment. Like I had done years earlier, he silently worked through the numbers in his head, counting on his fingers because the total was almost too big to believe. Jean's voice came through the phone. "Morgan, first the October transfer disappears, and now you're planning a wedding we never agreed with. What's going on?" "You've been invited to my wedding. That's what's going on." She ended the call without another word. No RSVP arrived. Not that week. Not the week after. I called Grandma Ruth instead. She had already mailed hers back.
Yes.
Along with a handwritten note tucked inside. "I wouldn't miss your special day for anything, sweetheart." Garrett's mother, Doris, a retired school cafeteria worker from Lewiston who raised Garrett by herself after his father walked away when Garrett was 6, mailed her RSVP the same day the invitation reached her. She even called to ask if she could bring her homemade apple pie and whether the barn venue had a kitchen she could use. Out of 85 invitations, 63 people replied yes within 2 weeks. My coworkers from the hospital, Garrett's construction crew, friends from medical school, several cousins on my mother's side who had always cared more about me than pleasing Patrice. My parents? Nothing. 14 days before the wedding, the 2 people who had accepted $96,000 from me couldn't manage to check a box, seal an envelope, and drop it in the mail. Eventually, I stopped expecting an answer. October 8th, 11 days before the wedding. During a break at work, I was scrolling through Instagram when something caught my attention. A cousin had reshared an invitation. Pink and gold. Elegant cursive lettering. "Join us for Jolene and Brett's gender reveal. Saturday, October 19th, 5 p.m. The Tate Residence, Scarborough. October 19th. My wedding day." I opened Jolene's original post. She had shared it nearly 3 weeks earlier. My mother had liked it. She had even commented, "Can't wait," followed by a pink heart. For 3 weeks I had been waiting for an RSVP that was never coming. I called Jolene. She answered almost immediately. "Your gender reveal is scheduled on my wedding day." "Oh, is it?" Her voice sounded almost amused. "I didn't think about that. Besides, it's at our house, and October 19th was the only date that worked for everyone." "Everyone, including Mom and Dad?" "Morgan, I'm pregnant. This is about my baby. Not everything revolves around you." I pulled the phone away for a second, took a slow breath, then raised it again. "Mom confirmed your party 3 weeks ago. She still hasn't responded to my wedding invitation." Jolene went silent. 2 seconds. Then she said, "Maybe you should have picked another date." I ended the call. I didn't phone my parents. I didn't postpone my wedding. Instead, I opened my spreadsheet one final time. The red column. $43,000 transferred to Jolene over 38 months. And now, she had deliberately planned her gender reveal on the exact day I was getting married. It wasn't a coincidence. She chose October 19th because she knew our parents would choose her. She chose it because she always could. October 12th, 1 week before the wedding. I drove to Scarborough by myself. I sat once again at my parents' kitchen table. The same table where I'd eaten countless dinners growing up. Finished homework. Argued over curfews. Opened birthday cards with $10 bills tucked inside. Patrice sat across from me. Jean leaned against the counter with his arms folded. My wedding is in 7 days, I said. I need to know if you're coming. Patrice calmly folded her hands. Morgan, Jolene needs us. She's 8 months pregnant, and her gender reveal is the same day. We can't be in 2 places. You can attend the ceremony. It starts at 2. Her party doesn't begin until 5. We have to help her get everything ready. She can't do it by herself. Brett has relatives. Friends. She isn't alone. Patrice looked at me without hesitation. She is our daughter. I let those words settle. She is our daughter. Spoken to me, her other daughter, as though I were an outsider asking for a favor instead of family. Jean shifted where he stood. And what about the money? This isn't about money. It's about my wedding. His expression hardened. It's always about the money, Morgan. You stopped sending it. We noticed. I pushed my chair back and stood. The legs scraped across the hardwood floor I'd unknowingly helped pay for. I'm asking one last time. Will you be there? Patrice glanced at Jean. Jean stared at the floor. Finally, she looked back at me with an expression that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite defiance. Something carefully practiced between the two. We'll try. I had driven 40 minutes just to hear those words. We'll try. I knew exactly what they really meant. It meant no. It meant Jolene. It meant my monthly payments mattered more than witnessing their daughter's wedding. I didn't cry on the drive home. I'd already moved beyond tears. The final week before the wedding seemed to move at 2 completely different speeds. At the hospital, time raced. At home, every hour crawled. Garrett's mother, Doris, arrived from Lewiston that Wednesday. She brought her apple pie, 3 casseroles, a garment bag holding her church dress, and a hug that lasted 11 full seconds. I counted because I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be embraced by a mother who expected nothing in return. My son chose well, she whispered. I'm proud of both of you. Grandma Ruth called every evening. I'm bringing my homemade rolls and a little surprise. You're going to love it. My parents? Still nothing. There was no phone call, no text, no RSVP card arriving at the last minute with a guilty explanation. A few days later, my college friend Sadie came down from Boston to help with my final dress fitting. She stood behind me as I adjusted the straps in front of the mirror. Simple ivory satin. No train. Clean lines. Where's your mom? Sadie asked quietly. Busy. She knew me well enough not to ask anything else. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my apartment. Garrett was staying at his mother's hotel, following the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. The silence felt unfamiliar. No monitor alarms. No hospital intercom. No stretchers rolling down hallways. I opened my banking app. The old automatic transfer schedule was still visible. $2,000 canceled. The word sat there in gray letters. Simple.
Permanent.
Final. I closed the app and looked at my wedding dress hanging from the bedroom door. Tomorrow I would wear it. Tomorrow I would stand beside people who wanted to celebrate with me. And for the first time in 4 years, I would no longer be sacrificing my own future to finance someone else's comfort. October 19th. 7 o'clock that morning. The barn in Kennebunkport. I woke in the bridal suite, a cozy room above the reception hall with whitewashed walls and a single window overlooking the river. Outside, autumn morning light mixed gray with gold while the last of the fog drifted across the water. Garrett had texted me just before midnight. Tomorrow, you officially become my family. Sadie fixed my hair. Doris arrived carrying breakfast. Scrambled eggs.
Toast.
Fresh orange juice. Everything neatly arranged on a cloth napkin she had ironed herself at the hotel. She placed the plate in front of me, kissed my forehead, and smiled.
Eat.
You've got a wonderful day ahead. I checked my phone. No messages from my parents. No missed calls. Their names were absent from the screen, just as they had been all week. Grandma Ruth arrived at 11. She stepped into the bridal suite wearing a navy blue dress with pearl buttons and the same silver hair clip I remembered from childhood. The moment she saw me in my wedding dress, she stopped in the doorway. Her chin quivered. Your mother should be here. She isn't coming, Grandma. I know, sweetheart. I know. She opened the walnut-colored leather purse she'd carried for decades. From inside, she removed a small silver brooch decorated with blue forget-me-not flowers. This belonged to my mother. Something old, something blue, and something far more meaningful than anything they deserved to witness. She pinned it inside my dress, directly over my heart. No one else would ever see it, but I would feel it with every heartbeat. The first tear of the day slipped free. Grandma Ruth gently wiped it away with her thumb. That's the only one you're allowed before the ceremony, she said with a smile. Save the rest for the dance floor. 2 o'clock. The ceremony began. 78 of the 85 invited guests were there. On my side sat Grandma Ruth in the front row. 3 cousins. 8 coworkers from the hospital.
Sadie.
Several friends from medical school. Garrett's side was filled with Doris, his 3 electricians wearing sport coats that clearly spent most of their lives in closets, and more than 24 relatives from Lewiston who had happily driven 90 minutes just to celebrate with us. I walked down the aisle alone. Garrett was already crying before I reached him. His crew pretended not to notice. Doris pressed a tissue against her lips. Grandma Ruth sat perfectly straight, holding herself together with the quiet strength of women from her generation. Garrett read his vows first. I choose you, not because loving you is easy, but because you're worth choosing. When it was my turn, I don't remember every word. I only remember that every sentence came straight from my heart. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. The entire barn erupted. 78 people applauded. Some stood. Doris cried openly. Grandma Ruth smiled and nodded. One of Garrett's electricians let out a loud whistle that echoed across the room. 3:30 that afternoon. Guests drifted toward the cocktail hour. I slipped outside alone into the parking lot. Then I called my mother. 4 rings. She answered.
What?
I just got married, Mom. We're at Jolene's. The gender reveal was beautiful. It's a girl. I just got married. Silence. Then 3 words. Don't bother us. The call ended. I stood there in the cool October air with my phone still in my hand. The brooch rested against my heart beneath the satin. Inside the barn, my husband was celebrating with 78 people who had chosen to stand beside us. My mother had chosen pink balloons in Scarborough. I remained in that parking lot for 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my phone change twice. I wasn't crying anymore. What I felt was quieter than grief, heavier than sadness. It was the calm that comes after a decision has already been made. I opened my banking app. Joint savings account with my parents. Balance, $340. I submitted the paperwork to remove myself as a joint account holder. Processing time, 24 hours. Next, I opened my personal checking account. I updated my direct deposit information. Then I deleted the secondary monthly transfer that sent $200 directly to Jean's account for gas and groceries. Cancelled. Finally, I checked the old automatic transfer. $2,000 to the Myers joint savings account. Already cancelled since September. Still permanently cancelled. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That was all it took to end every financial connection between us. I slipped my phone back into my clutch. Standing in a gravel parking lot in Kennebunkport, Maine, wearing my wedding dress, with my grandmother's brooch resting over my heart. Then I walked back inside. The barn was alive with music, laughter, conversation, and the clink of champagne glasses. Garrett saw my face immediately. He crossed the room. What happened? I'll tell you tonight. Right now. I want to dance with my husband. He smiled, took my hand, and led me onto the dance floor. The band began playing a slow song. I rested my head against his shoulder, and he held me the way every person deserves to be held, like I truly mattered. Somewhere in Scarborough, my father's phone vibrated. A banking alert. Co-owner removed from account ending in 4471. He hadn't seen it yet. First, I was going to enjoy my dance. It took Gene about 30 minutes. He was standing at Jolene's gender reveal, holding a paper plate with a slice of pink cake, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. The first alert said the joint savings account had lost a co-owner. The second said the secondary transfer had been canceled. Without saying much, he stepped outside, crossed the driveway, and called my number. Straight to voicemail. My phone was tucked inside my clutch, sitting silently on a table in the barn while 78 guests celebrated my wedding over dinner and champagne. He called 7 times. Every call ended the same way. Then the text messages started. Call me immediately. Morgan, what did you do? This isn't funny. You can't just cut us off. He drove to the closest ATM and tried withdrawing money from the savings account. His card still worked. Available balance: $340. He stared at the screen for several seconds before driving back to Jolene's house. When he walked inside, my mother was filling the punch bowl. She looked at his face. What happened? Jean answered loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. She shut everything down. Patrice quickly lowered her voice. Keep it down. We've only got $300, Patrice. $300. Jolene, still wearing a pink balloon tied around her wrist, looked over from the dessert table. What are you talking about? No one answered, because explaining would mean admitting the truth. That their doctor-daughter had financed their lives for 4 straight years. That they had chosen Jolene's gender reveal over Morgan's wedding. There was no way to explain it without exposing themselves. So they stood in a room filled with pink decorations and stayed silent. That night, Garrett and I checked into a bed and breakfast in Kennebunkport, only 3 miles from the barn. White linens. A fireplace glowing softly. A window overlooking a garden settling into winter. After Garrett fell asleep, I picked up my phone. 14 missed calls. 9 voicemails. Voicemail 1 from Jean. Morgan, call me back. There's been some kind of mistake. Voicemail 3. This is unacceptable. We had an agreement. Voicemail 4. You owe us this. You can't just stop. His voice cracked on the word stop. Voicemail 7 came much later. His speech was slurred. Something rattled in the background. You'll come crawling back. You always do. At 11 that night, Patrice texted. Morgan, I don't know what's gotten into you. I hope you're happy destroying your father's health. Another message arrived at 11:47.
Fine.
Don't answer. But when you need us, and you will, you'll remember tonight. I read every single message. I didn't play the voicemails out loud. Instead, I held the phone close in the dark while my husband slept peacefully beside me. I took screenshots of every text and voicemail and saved them into the same folder that already contained the bank records, withdrawal history, guilt text timeline, and the email about the transfer problem. Then I sent both of them one final message. I got married yesterday. You weren't there. The money ended. Those things are connected. I pressed send. Placed the phone inside the nightstand drawer. Closed it. Garrett shifted slightly in his sleep. The fireplace continued to crackle. Outside, the ocean made the same endless sound it always had.
Steady.
Unconcerned. Unstoppable. I lay there listening. For the first time in 4 years, I owed nothing to anyone. I had just finished reading 14 missed calls and 9 voicemails from parents who couldn't spare a few hours to attend my wedding, but noticed missing money within half an hour. If you've ever felt valued only for what you could provide, then you already know that feeling.
Stay with me.
Because Thanksgiving was coming. And so were the bank statements. November arrived cold and gray, just like every year in Maine. I returned to work as chief resident. For the first time in 38 months, my paycheck landed in my account, and the extra $2,000 stayed exactly where it belonged. I redirected it toward my student loans. The first payment hit the principal like a stone dropped into calm water. Another $2,000 erased. For the first time in years, the math felt lighter. At that pace, I'd be debt-free by 37 instead of 42. During the second week of November, Jolene gave birth to a baby girl named Lily. I mailed a gift through Amazon. A package of organic cotton onesies. I didn't go to the hospital. Patrice left another voicemail. You have a niece now and you can't even visit? What kind of person does that make you? I saved it. Never called back. Meanwhile, Jean had started listing belongings on Facebook Marketplace. A cousin sent me screenshots. The new appliances. The patio furniture. The convection oven. The very things my money had paid for were now being sold off at bargain prices. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, Grandma Ruth called. Are you coming? I'm hosting everyone. I'll be there, Grandma. Good, she replied, because I'd like to know why your mother has been telling everyone you abandoned your family. I paused. What exactly has she been saying? That you stopped supporting them. That you picked your husband over your parents. That you're selfish and ungrateful. Her voice stayed calm, but beneath that calm was steel. The voice of a woman who knew she'd been lied to. I'll be there, I told her. And I'll bring the receipts. I meant that literally. I printed every bank statement. For years. 48 pages. November 28th. Grandma Ruth's home in Bangor. A white Cape Cod house with green shutters and a front porch that leaned slightly to one side. She had lived there since 1967. The house smelled of roasted turkey, fresh rolls, and lavender sachets tucked into every closet. Garrett and I arrived just after noon. The manila envelope rested inside my bag. 48 pages. For years. Every transaction highlighted in yellow. Patrice was already there. She didn't hug me. Instead, she turned toward Aunt Linda with a polished smile and announced, "Oh, look. The prodigal daughter finally decided to show up." Jean sat quietly in Ruth's favorite armchair by the window. He never looked me in the eye. He looked thinner than he had a month earlier. Older, too. The kind of wear that only appears when comfort disappears and reality finally arrives. Jolene sat on the couch with baby Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms while Brett stood behind her, hands tucked into his pockets. They greeted me with identical nods, polite, distant. Almost rehearsed. 19 people filled Ruth's house that afternoon. Aunt Linda, Uncle Paul, my cousins Marcus, Diane, and Rachel. Ruth's longtime neighbor Helen, who hadn't missed a Thanksgiving in 2 decades. 2 more cousins had driven in from Lewiston. Some of them had already heard my mother's version of the story. Morgan abandoned us. Morgan stopped helping her parents. Morgan married beneath her station and forgot where she came from. Marcus caught me in the hallway before dinner. Is it true you cut your parents off? I'll explain after we eat, I answered. From the kitchen doorway, Grandma Ruth watched everything. She had spent the entire morning quietly observing Patrice's performance. The sighs, the whispered conversations with Aunt Linda, the careful dabbing of perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. She never interrupted. She simply kept score. Dinner ended. The dishes were cleared away. The table was left scattered with crumbs, water rings, and half-finished glasses of cider. Grandma Ruth rose from her chair and rested both palms firmly against the table. Before we bring out dessert, she said, I think this family needs to clear the air. Patrice was ready. She had clearly practiced this speech for weeks. I saw it in the way she straightened her shoulders and softened her voice. Mom, I don't want to embarrass Morgan, she began. But yes, my own daughter has abandoned us after everything we've sacrificed for her. Enough. Ruth didn't raise her voice.
She didn't have to.
The room froze. 19 people stopped moving. A fork tapped lightly against a plate. Then even that sound disappeared. I opened the large manila envelope and carefully laid the documents across the table. 48 pages. Every deposit highlighted in yellow. For 3 years and 2 months, I said evenly. I transferred $2,000 every month. $76,000 went into the joint savings account. Another $12,000 went directly into Dad's personal account. $88,000 altogether. Next, I unfolded my spreadsheet. Green entries marked every deposit. Red entries tracked every withdrawal. 43% of every dollar I sent ended up with Jolene, or was spent on Brett's car dealership. Another 22% paid for vacations, home remodeling, spa trips to Cape Cod, and personal expenses. I pointed to the orange section. The mortgage, the reason I agreed to help in the first place, received only 31%. Nobody spoke. Not a single person. Uncle Paul slowly slipped on his reading glasses and pulled one of the pages toward himself. Aunt Linda leaned over beside him. Patrice's voice turned sharp. Those are private financial records. You had no right to bring those here. They're my bank statements, I replied calmly. My name was on the account. My money. Gene shoved his chair back. You ungrateful little. Gene. Grandma Ruth never raised her voice. Sit down. He obeyed immediately. A 79-year-old woman barely 4 feet 11 inches tall had ended the argument with a single sentence. I looked directly at my mother. My voice stayed perfectly steady. On October 19th, my wedding day, I called you. You answered. And the only words you said were, "Don't bother us." You were attending Jolene's gender reveal, the one scheduled on the exact day I got married. I'm not asking anyone to repay the money. I'm not threatening legal action. I'm telling the truth because you've spent the last month telling this family that I abandoned you. I didn't abandon anyone. I simply stopped paying to be treated like I didn't matter. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Aunt Linda spoke.
Carefully. Gently.
Patrice, is this true? $88,000? My mother's eyes searched the room for someone willing to defend her. Someone sympathetic. Someone who believed her story. She found no one. It's more complicated than that, she insisted. Morgan doesn't understand. Ruth cut her off immediately. What exactly doesn't she understand? I'm looking at the numbers. They're perfectly clear. Marcus had already picked up another stack of statements. He passed them to Uncle Paul. Soon the papers were moving around the table like evidence in a courtroom. Jolene's face had turned pale. She hugged baby Lily closer. I honestly didn't know the money came from Morgan, she whispered. Mom told me Dad was using his retirement savings. Brett slowly pushed back his chair. Some of my money had gone into his dealership. He claimed ignorance. His expression suggested otherwise. Jean made one last attempt. This is a private family matter. She's our daughter. That money belongs to the family. Uncle Paul looked up from the paperwork. No, Jean. Family money isn't funneled through one person's paycheck. Patrice burst into tears. Not genuine tears. The same carefully timed crying she had used for years whenever she needed sympathy. The same performance that kept my monthly transfers coming. So now everyone is against me? My own mother? My own family? Grandma Ruth looked directly at her daughter. Patrice. 2 weeks ago, I asked if Morgan had been helping financially. You said it was only a little. $88,000 is not a little. Patrice opened her mouth, then closed it again. 5 full seconds passed. I counted every one. She had no answer. Her chin quivered. Her eyes dropped to the table. For the briefest moment, she looked like someone who finally realized how far she'd gone. Then the moment disappeared. Her expression hardened once again. The performance returned. Morgan has always loved making everything dramatic, she said. She's only doing this because she wants attention. I pushed my chair back. I'm done. Garrett quietly gave us a moment alone. By the time we reached the front door, our coats were on, and the truck keys were already in his hand. Grandma Ruth followed us into the hallway. She walked the way she always did, slowly, deliberately, every step taken with purpose. She gently touched my arm. Her hand was tiny, warm, and steady. I truly didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I know, Grandma. She shook her head softly. $88,000. She spoke the number under her breath, as though repeating it might somehow make it easier to understand. My granddaughter was living on hospital cafeteria meals, so she could send her parents $88,000, and they couldn't even show up for her wedding. She looked down at her left hand. Slowly, she slipped off her wedding ring. It was a narrow gold band, its surface worn smooth by 57 years of marriage. Grandpa had bought it back in 1967 after working 3 different jobs just to afford it. She placed the ring in my palm and gently closed my fingers around it. The people who truly choose you, she said, Never expect payment. I stared at the ring. Garrett rested a comforting hand on my shoulder. Behind the closed dining room door, the house was falling apart. Patrice was crying. Jean was arguing with Uncle Paul. Jolene was on the phone, most likely calling Brett, who had stormed out 5 minutes earlier. Grandma Ruth looked at me for several long seconds before smiling sadly. Then she patted my hand. Go home. Warm up the leftovers. Hold your husband. That's what Thanksgiving is supposed to be about. I slipped the ring into my coat pocket. Garrett opened the front door. The cold November air swept inside, sharp, clean, and unforgiving. We walked to the truck. I never looked back. 3 months later, January 2025, Gene finally found work. He took a warehouse position at a distribution center in Westbrook, earning $17.50 an hour, Monday through Friday, from 6 in the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. Ironically, it was exactly the kind of job he had spent 4 years claiming was beneath him. Patrice accepted a part-time job at a flower shop in Scarborough. It was her first paycheck in 14 years. She arranged bouquets, worked the register, and spent 3 days each week behind the counter. The social media posts disappeared. No more blessed life. No more grateful heart. Jolene and Brett sold their Honda CR-V. They replaced it with a 6-year-old Toyota Corolla with 90,000 miles on it. That same month, Brett's investment in the dealership collapsed. Apparently, my $3,200 hadn't been enough to save a failing business. The investor group walked away. Brett went back to selling cars for another dealership. After Thanksgiving, things slowly changed. 11 of the 19 relatives who had been there reached out to me. Some texted. Some called. A few even mailed handwritten cards. Most of them said the same thing. We didn't know. We should have asked. Aunt Linda sent flowers to the hospital where I worked. Her note read, "Your mother told us you were selfish. She was wrong." Marcus started a group chat with me, Rachel, and Diane. He named it Family That Actually Communicates. Every few days, we'd exchange recipes, funny news stories, pictures of everyday life. Nothing extraordinary, just the quiet little things people share when they genuinely want to stay connected. Grandma Ruth called every Sunday afternoon. She began telling me stories about her own mother, a woman who had raised 5 children on a small farm outside Bangor. She also gave too much to people who never appreciated it, Ruth told me one afternoon. I didn't realize I was watching history repeat itself. People often ask whether I've forgiven my parents. My answer never changes. When they're ready for an honest conversation instead of another performance, I'll listen. The door isn't locked. It's simply closed, and those aren't the same thing. Patrice hasn't called me since Thanksgiving. Not once. According to Ruth, she's still telling people the version where she's the victim and I'm the selfish daughter who abandoned her family. The only difference now, far fewer people believe it. Gene called once in early December. His voice sounded different, smaller. The confidence he'd always borrowed from Patrice was gone. He said only 4 words. I got a job. I answered with one. Good. That was the entire conversation. 11 seconds. The shortest phone call we'd ever shared. But something about it felt different. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't another request for money. It was simply a fact, shared with the one person who understood exactly what it meant. Near the end of January, Jolene texted me a picture of baby Lily. There wasn't a message attached. Just the photo. Round cheeks. Dark hair. Wrapped in a blanket I'd never seen before. Not the seafoam green blanket I'd spent weeks crocheting. A few seconds later, another message arrived.